Hi, Laura. Welcome to Mom on the Verge.
Hi, Katie. Thank you.
I really appreciate you being here today, and I'm excited for this conversation. I will do an intro. The listeners will hear an intro before they hear the beginning of this conversation. But just so everybody knows, you and I were in a program together. That's how we met, and we have a lot in common. So I think
Yeah.
this is going to be a really great conversation. I always ask my guests just to do a little intro on themselves. I'm, very particular about how I select my guests because I want really particular topics on my show. So, you're an alignment coach,
hmm
and I find that super fascinating. So, how did you become an alignment coach? Because I'm sure it's probably not what you said when you were 6 that you were going to do.
No, that is true. That is true. No, it was a later in life sort of evolution for me as I was nearing my 50s, and I happened to lose both of my parents 6 months apart in the same year, which was a huge transition. And I knew I was no longer happy at the job that I was in at the fire department in administration, where I'd been for 15 years. And I had an ache in my heart that took me quite a while to figure out what was that ache. And I finally realized it was kind of a call to move to have my insides match my outsides more. I'd always been a spiritual person, and but I'd kind of always been in the background helping others go after their dreams. And I finally kind of had a call for myself to step forward, start using my own voice, and go after what I wanted. And what I wanted was to be doing more inner work, helping. I had to go on my own journey first and really discover who I was at that point in my life and what was it that I wanted to move towards. So I kind of had a whole process that I went through personally. And then I decided that I wanted to become a coach. And I took a coaching program that is based around intuitive coaching. So it really led me on a path of getting in touch with my own intuition, learning how to meditate, journal, all kinds of things to kind of quiet the outside noise and get in touch with what I truly wanted at my core and maybe what gift I had to bring. And then I was so hooked that I wanted to help people do that in their own lives. And that stuff. So I'm a mindset and alignment coach. I can talk about that all day long. And sometimes I do. But it's really, really powerful. And it helps me continue to do my own work, which I
Yeah.
really loved because it requires us to continue to do our own healing. But we can also help others heal along the way as well, which is really, that's everything for me now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. There's so many little pieces I want to pull out of that. So, you were in your, did you say mid 50s when this
No,
happened?
I was approaching 50 when
Okay.
and I always knew our time here is not guaranteed, but when you
Mhm.
lose both of your parents, especially together, it really made me understand, oh, our time here really is, it has an end date and none of us know how
Um,
long that's going to be. And it
yeah.
gave me a new sense of, it wasn't urgency, but it was intentionality. Like, what do I want this next phase of my life to look like? And I'm not going to take any of it for granted.
Yeah. I think loss has a way of doing that for people. And it's one of the gifts that come out of loss, even though it's so hard. But
Yeah.
also, I mean, I think it's really important to highlight that it's never too late, right? So you always
hmm
had this feeling inside of you. You always had this pull or tug or calling, but you just weren't ready to step into it until that
hmm
time. And I think there's a lot of people out there who think like I've missed the boat. It's too late for me. I should have done it earlier. I have too much else going on in my life. I'll never have time for it. All the excuses that we can come up with
hmm
about why we can't step into our own alignment.
Yeah.
And I think your example is a very beautiful example of saying that it is just never too late to do
hmm
the work or to do whatever it is that you feel so internally pulled to do.
I
Because
completely agree.
yeah, it's really why we were put here. It's why we came here. And it will never go away. Not until you draw your last breath will it go away. So
Yes.
there's always opportunity.
Well, and I feel like women at the stage of their life where their kids are a little older don't require quite as much of them. It's pretty common to have this sense of, is this all there is?
Yeah.
I have something more to give, but I'm not 100% clear on what that is. And that
Mhm.
always excites me when a woman is wanting to figure out, like, go on that journey and figure out what that is. And like, it's a great thing when we all of a sudden have maybe more time than we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and we can now invest that in ourselves. And I also think that is a beautiful gift to give to our children if they see their
Mhm.
mom lit up about something and going after a dream.
Yeah.
It's great for them to see that, but we don't always know what our dream is, and it does require some internal work sometimes, and that is something that just fascinates me, and it's available to all of us. So I love helping women on that journey to rediscover who they are, because it really is a returning to who you are. We already have it inside of us, but sometimes all of the noise and the demands on us and the people pleasing even can kind of get in the way. So it's like peeling an onion, right? You got to take the
Yeah.
layers off one at a time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm one of those women that you talk about. Like I am at a stage where, I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old. And so
Mm,
obviously the demands on my time are not the same as when they were babies and toddlers and even like young grade schoolers. And all along, all that time when they were babies and toddlers and really young and demanding my time, I still had that something inside of me that was saying kind of,
mhm.
is this it? I feel like I'm here for more. I feel
Yeah.
like I have gifts that I don't even know what they are. I'm not sure what they are at this moment in time. I just know there's something else, and it's
Hmm.
actually very painful when you
Hmm.
feel that and you don't know how to figure out what it is and you don't know how to move forward.
Hmm.
Like you just feel so stuck. It's a
Yes.
very, and then you got, if you're stuck long enough, and I was stuck for a pretty long time, I started thinking, I guess I was wrong, right? I guess this
Mm.
feeling was wrong. I guess I wasn't meant for any more than this. Like I'm just
Oh,
supposed to be the mom and the nurse and like
right.
that's it. That's what I'm supposed to be. And it took cracking myself wide open to really just come back to what I knew all along from when I was very
Yes.
young. But I had somehow given up on or forgotten or thought was
Hmm.
unrealistic or thought there wasn't enough time or energy or money or the thousand excuses because in the moment that feels very real. Those
Hmm.
I call them excuses and I don't like that word because it almost sounds like I'm blaming somebody, but those reasons, that rationale feels
Right.
extremely real in the
Hmm.
moment. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, it does take that internal work. And the good news though is that even when your babies are really young and they are really, and I didn't do this because I didn't know back then, but for those listeners who are listening, you can still do this internal work because a lot
Hmm.
of this internal work can be done. You can do it in little tiny pieces here and there,
Hmm.
and it really does add up over time. Those little
Yes.
pieces on from day to day really do make a huge difference.
I so agree with you. And I agree it's painful. I used to describe it as an ache. I could feel an ache inside of me, but I couldn't put words to what it was. Um, but I think as women, especially, we're so used to putting everybody else first. And it's nobody's at fault or to blame, but I think it's like a rebirth and awakening that we kind of have to go through and figure out how do we start putting ourselves first, because it feels
Mhm.
very counterintuitive as a mom to take care of ourselves first. But I say it's actually critical, because if we don't learn that, we start to have health issues.
Mhm.
Little whispers start showing up in our life that are trying to call our attention to pay more attention to ourselves and what we need. And those whispers tend to get louder and louder if we're not paying attention. And that's what happened to me. I actually ended up having symptoms of a heart attack at work, and ended up in the hospital because my blood pressure was sky high. And it appeared that I was having a heart attack at age 50. That
Gosh.
was a huge wake up call for me, and had a very enlightening conversation with the cardiologist. And she said to me, we've done all the tests on your heart head to toe, and your heart is good. that's the good news. Everything is physically well with your heart. Now I want you to tell me about the stress in your life. And as
Mm.
soon as she said that, the tears just started to come
Yeah.
down my face. And she sat with me for like half an hour and talked about what I was experiencing
Mm.
and the stress at work and how I just wasn't fulfilled anymore. And she said, I'm going to write you a note for stress leave. I want you to be off work for 6 weeks. And I want you to take these 6 weeks to rediscover who you are, which was really an amazing gift
Wow. Yeah.
and doesn't always
Wow.
happen that way. But
Yeah.
I took those 6 weeks to do a deep dive into what did I love to do? What did I stopped doing that used to really bring me joy? A lot of journaling, a lot of like courses I was taking to just really get back in touch with what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. So I'm really
Mhm.
thankful for that conversation.
Yeah.
But it did have to get to kind of a scary point before I really started to pay attention to that. And it really made me understand, oh, stress can physically impact our body. Like it felt
Yeah.
like I was having a heart attack.
Yeah. Yeah. That's both so scary, but also so amazing at the same time, because obviously that's a very scary experience for you, but it's
Mhm.
like that particular doctor was plucked from the heavens and put into your life. I mean, you're
Yes,
not going to find someone like that a lot. So what
I
a
agree.
beautiful
That's not a
blessing.
typical, yeah, not a typical doctor conversation in this day and
Yeah,
age. So yeah, you're right. It probably was meant to be like that.
truly, truly what a
Yeah.
gift. And but we would prefer that women not get there, right? Not get to that point
Yes.
where they're in the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack because they have neglected their body, mind, soul, spirit for so long,
Mhm.
for so
Mhm.
long.
Yeah,
Um,
very true.
the other thing that I love that you said when you were talking about, how you got into this work was that it keeps you in the work. So you doing this work
Mhm.
for other people keeps you in your own work. And I feel that so deeply because it's a journey. And again, like the
Mhm.
journey until you draw your last breath, you are on the journey. I personally believe in reincarnation. So I feel like I'll just come back and keep going on the journey, but it's never ending. You can learn so much and continue to grow so much. And the beautiful part of doing this kind of work is the fact that you keep getting to go deeper and deeper into these practices and get to know
Yeah.
yourself better and have a better understanding of why we're really here and all
Mhm.
that. So for people out there who are like, well, I'll never get to a point. I'll never get to where Laura is, or I'll never get to where somebody else is that maybe they look forward, they look up to. It doesn't matter. We're all on the journey. We're all on the same path, right? We're just
Yeah,
on different places on the path, along the path.
absolutely.
No one has reached the end of the road.
Mhm.
We're all just in our own place, learning our own thing, moving forward, hopefully most of the time, sometimes going backwards, then going
Yep,
forward
yep.
again,
That's
right?
right. It's both, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So,
Our journey is not going to look like anybody else's. It's
right.
unique to us. That's actually one of my favorite sayings is you are unique just like everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's fantastic.
but it's such a beautiful journey. It doesn't mean it's without its dips and
Mhm.
painful moments, and there's healing involved, and like you said, sometimes it's a backward step before we can move ahead. But it's that's when I was really sold, when I understood that it was going to require me to continue my own work in order to be able to help others. And boy, has it required my own work.
Yeah.
There is always a new level of realization or discovering a limiting belief that's holding us back that we weren't aware of before. And to me, it's beautiful because that's, I think, part of being a human. We're here to evolve and awaken and grow. And that, like you said, that process continues till we take our last breath.
Yeah.
Why would we want to stop that any earlier? That doesn't make
Right.
sense to me, because if you're not growing, the alternative is not
Right.
great. So
Yes.
even if it's difficult at times, I would prefer to be growing and learning new things and
Right.
just becoming more aware.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, to me, it really is the magic of life, and
Yeah.
and it can be difficult at times. But really all the best things are in life, right? I mean,
Yes.
parenthood isn't easy either, but right,
Yeah,
that's
that's
a
right.
journey and
And
it
there's
has
no
its
rule book for
highs.
that either. Yeah,
No,
you
no
just got to
rule
find your
book.
way.
Yes, yes. And these kids really, I think they come to teach us so much, and we get exactly what we need in our children. And it's hard, but it's also really beautiful. And it's a lot like that. It's a lot like the journey. The journey of life is a lot like the journey of parenthood, and the journey of awakening and
Hmm.
coming fully into alignment, and the inner work is again a lot the same. It's really the same
Right.
journey. Yeah.
That's actually very helpful for me, especially with all the different phases that my kids are in right now. It's a good reminder that, like you say, we get the kids we're meant to have, and they help teach us lessons that we're meant to learn. So
Yeah.
I'm going to keep that top of mind in the
Yeah.
tough moments.
Sometimes I'm like, God, wow, you really wanted to teach me a
Yeah.
lot this lifetime. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not easy.
yeah.
It's so true. And they're all so different, which is
Yes.
interesting too, because what works for one kid doesn't work for the other one. And,
Right.
it's constantly pushing and stressing us or stretching us as parents.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
stressing and stretching. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't ask you, how old are your children?
I have a 12-year-old girl and
Okay.
then a 22 and 24-year-old boys. So second
Okay.
family
Okay.
situation. Yeah. So a big
Okay.
spread between them.
Yeah.
I always kind of say if I'd had three young ones all at the same time, I don't think I would have made it. So I
Yeah.
was kind of glad I spaced them out.
Yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
don't think I would have made it either. I only have two, but they're 5 years apart. And I see a lot of people who have their kids 1 or 2 years apart. And I mean, that would not have gone well in my household.
Chaos. Yes. It's a
Yes,
lot. Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
I agree.
So, do you feel that this work you've done, this inner work that you've done for yourself, and then working with your clients,
Hmm.
has it helped you in your parenthood journey?
I would say yes, for sure. It has helped me be, I mean, I'm going to say on my best days, more present, more calm, more patient, aware, like you say, that my kids have something to teach me. So, sort of being humble enough to accept those teachings
Mm-hmm.
rather than
Mm-hmm.
think, no, I'm the parent, I know what's right, I need to
Yeah.
force my kid to do whatever.
Yeah.
Um, it's helped me understand, and just be more open-minded. And definitely meditation has helped me learn how to take a pause before reacting, which is very helpful with kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even it fails at times, and learning how to apologize and
Yeah.
be accountable for how we've maybe reacted in the moment. But it definitely is helpful. I wouldn't want to do it without the tools that I've learned now.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially the last 10 years of, I would say, have been extra challenging as a parent for sure.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And I would not really know how I would be getting through my parenthood journey without
Yes.
without everything that I have learned.
Yeah.
And my listeners know that I have a daughter who has struggled with mental health
Mm.
and physical health, quite honestly. She's struggled a lot with physical health. And I started on this journey because of my own struggles personally that I was
Mhm.
having, that led me to become curious. Really, it
Mhm.
led me to I was in desperate, is really the
Yeah.
real reason. I was really in desperation and I needed
Mhm.
something. And I feel like, when you're on your knees, when you're at that moment where you're on your knees and you just surrender and you're like, I just need help. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
That's when the help arrives, because you're not
Mm.
trying to control anymore. You're just like wide open, right? Like when your parents passed away and you're just like
Yeah.
wide open, and
Yes.
it's an allowing of what has always been there, but you just were not ready to see or hear or
Mm.
hold. And so that's where my journey began. But I
Mhm.
feel like I had those things come into my life and I was brought to my knees in those moments so that I would start on this path, so that when I hit these struggles with my daughter, I
Mhm.
had a lot of these skills and tools and knowledge and practices and all of the things that would help carry me through
Mhm.
such a challenging situation, because
Yeah.
when you again are brought to a place of your own, you're because it's you and you're on your knees because of something happening to you personally, that's one level of suffering.
Mm.
But when it is your child, it is a whole other level
Oh
of
yeah.
suffering.
Yeah.
Yes, a whole other level of suffering. But there has to be that surrender there too. There has to be that faith and that trust that this is their journey, and
Mm-hmm.
that I was there to, and still am there to support my daughter on the journey, but having to know that I couldn't fix it. I couldn't control the situation. I couldn't fix the situation, which is, of course, what we desperately want to do as parents.
Right.
And I had to allow her to have her journey with the knowledge that I was walking beside her.
Right.
And that's really hard. It's it's
Talk
really
about being brought to your knees, right? As a mom,
yes.
there's nothing worse than not being able to help your child in the way that you want to.
Yes.
And it can sometimes be that they don't want your help. And that was
Mhm.
kind of my experience with my oldest son. He's had about 10 years ago, he admitted that he was having struggles with his mental health, and we tried to get him some help, kind of his later years in high school. And we saw a bunch of counselors, a bunch of doctors, but he didn't get a true diagnosis, and he didn't get in front of the right people. And he eventually lost faith in all of the people that I was trying to, even in the system that was trying to help him. And he refused to receive any more help. And I tried as hard as I could and researched everything I could and thought about taking him to other countries, and just I was desperate to find help for him, but he didn't want it.
Mhm.
And that was a moment that really over and over brought me to my knees, especially as he shared with me that he was close to giving up because life was never going to be what he thought it was going to be or hoped it could be. And that was another point where I was accessing help and getting counseling as a parent with a child that's struggling. Um, and they said to me, the only thing you can do right now is to truly take care of yourself, because if you go under, you won't be able to help him. And they said, you need to have faith that one day he will be ready to ask for help again. And he knows that you're there and that you'll help him get that help. You need to take care of yourself so that you're not also, just tanking out. Um, and that's kind of been a long journey for me, is how do you figure out as a parent to be okay when your kid is not okay?
Mhm. Mhm.
And we're not alone in this. I hear so many, parents, that's their situation as well. I'm not sure there's anything harder in life, to be honest. But you have to find a way to care for yourself and um, be well so that you can help them. And I understood the concept. If I'm on the floor and given up, then who's gonna help? So
Yeah.
it was a long, I want to say about 8 years,
Mhm.
until one day he phoned me and said, "Mom, I need help. I'm afraid to
Mhm.
be alone." And we took him to the hospital. Thankfully, he agreed to go because it has to be voluntary at his age. They won't, um, well, it's voluntary until you get there. And he finally got in front of the right people
Mhm.
and accepted help, accepted medication, received an actual diagnosis of schizophrenia. And he's on a much different path now, thank goodness. And now he has a team of people at his fingertips, which gives
Yeah.
me immense peace as a mom,
Mhm.
because I'm not going to be around forever, and
Right.
I can't be his everything. It's still not an easy journey, as I'm sure with your kids. That
Mhm.
getting help is fantastic. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it sure
Mhm.
helps in finding solutions. And it, even just with through growth and changing hormones and things like that, like they need constant attention and
Yeah.
help and a whole toolbox of tools. There's no one fix of
Yes.
anything. So I
Yes.
am very grateful that I trusted what they said. He did eventually ask for help, and thankfully
Yeah.
we were able to get him that. The story
Yeah.
doesn't always end that well, and I'm very aware of that. My heart
Yeah.
goes out to those parents. So we're just, yeah, take it day by
Yeah.
day, and that's all
Yeah.
you can do, really.
It really is. That the term that you use, like if I go under, it's interesting that you use that term, because I used to say that over and over when things were at the really, our really darkest times. I used to say, like, I'm the one steering this ship. So
Mm,
if I go under, this ship is lost in the storm,
yeah,
and it's a lot, when your child is going through all this and you're trying to get them help, you're trying to maneuver the maze of the healthcare system, and particularly the mental health healthcare
yeah.
system. And
Wait
it is,
times and like
ooh,
months to wait to see
yes,
somebody, and so
yes,
frustrating.
yes. And trying to get the proper diagnosis and the proper
Hmm.
medication and the proper therapists. And, it is a journey all its own. Um,
Yeah.
and I used to say the same thing, like, I have got to take care of myself. I have got to separate myself from her suffering, which is
Hmm.
so hard. But
Yeah.
in the knowledge that by doing that, I'm actually taking care of her. By separating her suffering from me and taking
Hmm.
care of myself, I am actually taking care of her, even though it kind of
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it in the moment.
Yeah, and it feels like an impossible task to
Yeah.
separate ourselves from our children. Like, and I don't know if you found this too, but I find that women and moms carry the mental load for our
Mm,
kids more
yes.
so, not always, but more so than dads do. It
Hmm.
just seems like kids open up to us more. We're more emotionally connected sometimes with them, and it's a heavy burden, especially when you've got, more than one kid, and
Hmm.
maybe more than one kid struggling, and then you have your own
Yeah.
mental health to be worrying about at the same time,
Yeah.
right? it's
Yeah.
it's a lot.
It is. It is a lot. And, when one person in the family is struggling, then it affects the entire family dynamic and all the relationships in the
Hmm.
family. And it is a lot. And then you go to that place of, my daughter was just in the hospital this week, and
Yeah.
I go to that place of, like, what is this going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Will she be able to hold a job? What does this look like in the future? Which never does anyone any good, right? In any
Yeah.
facet of life, right? And in any facet of life, when we start going down the rabbit hole of what if and
Yeah.
what's going to happen, we are really just setting ourselves up for suffering and disaster.
Yeah.
And now I am much more aware of that. I am human. Of course, I
Hmm.
still am going to start down that rabbit hole, but I can much faster go, oh, nope, turning around,
Hmm.
running out of here like my little bunny tail's on fire, right? Like,
Yeah, been here before, don't like
yeah, there's no good
it.
coming from this, no good. And so it's really an exercise in present moment awareness and gratitude, because in this moment, we're doing okay. In this moment, we have time to get more treatments and get to a better
Hmm.
place. Like in this moment, I have all these other things to be grateful for. So it's it's just another practice of
Yeah.
staying in the present moment, remembering all the things that you have to be grateful for. And when I can do that, when I can be in that place,
Hmm.
then I feel like I make the best decisions for her. Because there's a lot of decisions to be made, and a lot of them are impossible decisions. There is no
Mm.
way to know the right answer, unless you had a crystal ball. Is the only way you would ever know the right answer, which of course we don't have. So, but when I can be in a place of peace and be grounded and centered and calm and grateful, then I feel like I intuitively, it comes back to the intuition. Like my intuition
Hmm.
is allowed to come through, and it really helps me make decisions that I feel are the best decisions in the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you said that. And I'm curious, um, I sometimes have a hard time knowing when to push my son and enable him to take care of himself,
Mhm.
and not let the diagnosis be an excuse all the time for me to be enabling and helping him to do things, and figuring out which things are kind of complicated by the mental illness and which things are just plain young 20-year-old male
Right.
whatevers.
Yes. We say this all
it
the time.
it
Yes.
becomes so blurred that you're like,
It
Am I
does.
helping? Am
So
I making the
confusing.
problem
Yes.
worse?" Yeah, so
Yes.
sometimes I see it's an interesting practice when I force myself to step away
Mhm.
and let him figure this out. Not everything is a 911. He
Yeah.
has to have some learning on his own and be pushed outside of his comfort zone. But you also need to have compassion that, maybe they're dealing with more than the average person.
Mhm.
But knowing where that line is really challenging.
It's really challenging. And that line moves from day to day. That line is not always in the same place because
Yeah,
they're not always in the same place from day to day. And
yeah.
this, we're talking about, mental health struggles and also for my daughter, physical health struggles, but this could be your kid struggling with anything. It could be,
Hmm.
struggles with learning in school or friends or bullying or
Yeah,
just feeling like lost and alone. A lot of kids, I feel like they feel lost and alone as they're growing up,
yeah,
especially these days. I think it's more
yeah.
prevalent than ever. There's so many things our kids face that everything that we're talking about, all the same
Hmm.
principles apply. That
Hmm.
ability to be calm and centered, to hold space for your child, to walk beside them, to try to determine where you need to push them and where you need to step back, to separate yourself from their suffering. All of those same principles, I think,
Yeah,
apply no matter what
yeah,
your children are going through. And
absolutely.
you're going to not get it right all the time, right? We're not
No.
going to get it right all the time.
Well,
Uh,
and sometimes it's my own stuff coming up
Yeah.
and recognizing that so that you can kind of back away and deal with my own stuff and not kind of
Yeah.
project it onto our kids. That seems to be a constant lesson
Yes.
as well.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, parenting is
Yes,
not
it
for the
is.
faint of heart. It is,
No, it is
yeah. I mean,
not.
it's the most amazing thing, but like you said, it will bring us to our knees like multiple times.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
absolutely will. But we just keep getting back up. We just keep getting back up and
yeah.
hopefully with more awareness and having learned about ourselves and
Mhm.
them. And yeah, it's so hard to um not, like you said, not react,
Mhm.
to respond and to give our kids a little bit of space. I mean, you and I are probably not that different in our ages, and parenting, which was much different back then. And
Mhm.
you just did what your parents said, right? I mean,
Yeah, didn't question it.
you did not question it. You were going to get the belt if you did.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it was just very different. And so sometimes it's almost instinctual to go to that.
yeah.
And these are all patterns. These are all patterns that we
Yes.
start when we start doing this inner work, we start seeing the patterns and
Yeah.
where they are and where they came from. And that's when you can break the pattern, when you can recognize
Mhm.
it in the moment and
Yeah,
create that space in the moments when you can break the pattern.
absolutely. Well, and with my 12-year-old daughter, in many ways, she's been the most challenging of all three. And I love her spirit and she is not afraid to speak up for herself. If she doesn't understand something or doesn't agree with it, she will let you know. And I'm always thinking, I love this in you. This is going to serve you so well in the world, but I hate that you're using it on me.
Me,
I hate it. Like, because in my
yes.
family, that would have been considered talking back, being
Yes,
rude.
disrespectful.
We don't
Yes,
need to hear your opinion. You're just a kid, all that stuff.
right.
So it's interesting to see the shift. And I tell my husband that I'm like, I know it seems like rudeness, but she's actually just speaking up for herself and asking for an explanation for things that she doesn't understand.
Yeah.
But that can be difficult, like depending on how we were raised.
It can. And that's also a line that is blurry because you
Yeah,
want to foster that, right? You want to foster
yeah,
particularly a girl who feels
yeah.
confident and comfortable speaking her mind and advocating for herself and not, shrieking away and hiding, being her
Hmm.
full embodied self.
Yeah.
but you also want to encourage her to be kind and compassionate and respectful and all these other
Yes.
things. So it's like, it's a very blurry line. I think parenthood is just
Yeah.
full of these blurry lines.
That's right. It's true. Yeah. And the line with, I mean, every class she's been in her whole life, she's tried to tell the teacher how she thinks it should be run, right down to like kindergarten. And
Oh,
I try to tell her like that's amazing. However, the teacher is the one in charge. And when you're a teacher, you can just like there's certain times where you just
right.
need to respect the authority, but we certainly don't want to instill blind respect to everybody and people pleasing and not protecting yourself. But yeah, it is a blurry path to walk for sure, and therefore it's hard to teach, right? when do
Right.
you when do you just fall in line, and when do you push back and speak up for yourself?
Yeah. And I mean, that's a question I'm still asking.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I don't always get it right.
Yes. And I think that, like, the work that you're doing with women, with, helping them come into an alignment with themselves, it helps unblur some of these lines for ourselves. And
Hmm.
then I think that trickles down to our kids and how we raise them, right? How
Yeah.
we and that's the most beautiful gift of this work. If women who say, I need to work on myself, I need to come into alignment, I need to be able to hear my intuition, all
Hmm.
these things. Yes, you're doing that work for yourself, and that's amazing, but it is going to impact your children, and hopefully we raise a generation
Yeah.
that doesn't lose their way as much as we did,
Yeah,
right?
you're right, and it affects not only our children but our relationship and our bigger family. The ripples of that, I think, are more than we maybe realize, that when we work
Mhm.
on ourselves, and a lot of the world feels out of control right now, and I just keep reminding myself I can't control all of that, but I can control what's inside of me and what I'm thinking and believing and listening to, and trusting that that is having an effect, even though it feels like a very small effect, but it's
Right.
really the only thing I do have control over,
Yeah.
because I can't control the bigger things.
Yeah, no, that I think that's so true. And there are a lot of spiritual teachings, a lot of religious teachings actually that talk about exactly what you're saying. It's, we know we're here to serve, right? That's why we came here, is we're here to serve. But
Hmm.
sometimes serving feels impossible because we see these huge
Hmm.
problems in our world and we think, I can't, there's nothing I can do to fix that. And then we just want to like
Right.
hide away under our covers.
Yes.
And we feel out of control, and we feel, hopeless and
Yeah.
helpless. But what a lot of these spiritual teachings say is that you're only responsible for serving the people that you can touch. And if
Mm.
you serve one person a day, or, that's just in your sphere, that the
Hmm.
ripple effect of that
Right.
will spread out to the whole world,
Good.
and
Yeah.
I think we have to keep that in mind, because so many women in particular, I think, are, just open-hearted and compassionate, and they want to help so much. And it feels like it's impossible. It feels like the problems are
Hmm.
just too big. And then we go to
Yes.
that anxious,
And we
hopeless
can get
place.
stuck. Yes, if we get
Yes.
anxious, hopeless, stuck, I often have that feeling of I just want to go to bed and put the covers over my head, and
Yeah,
but then we're serving no one. So you're
right.
absolutely right. Like that's not a good place. Sometimes we do need to just rest and recover,
Yeah.
but then we get back up and we continue to try to serve, which
Yeah.
is, yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Hmm.
that's amazing. So tell me what you do, some of the things that you do with your clients. I'm curious how this process works.
So um, I came to understand what kind of the tools were that I used in my journey, and I narrowed them down to 12, and I think of them as 12 tools in my toolbox. Um, so the first four are kind of basic but extremely important. How much water am I drinking a day?
Mhm.
What kinds of food am I eating? How much sleep am I getting? And am I moving my body? And then it gets into, I tried to get in touch with what are the things, kind of the next level, that make life feel even more joyful for me. So it's about having something creative to do. It's about having financial education and understanding and feeling good with your finances. It's about growth and learning. I'm constantly learning and expanding my knowledge. And I feel like that gives us a new kind of thrill for life when we can learn something new that opens our mind even more. There is some type of service, and what are the other ones? Growth and service, a spiritual practice for sure. And it doesn't matter what that is or what you call that, but just some way of connecting to something bigger than ourselves. And now I'm going to forget what the other ones are. But so when I work with somebody, I like to figure out which areas are you already doing really well in, and maybe which areas do you need some help in. And I actually have it's called the Aligned Tools quiz on my website, where somebody can go through and just answer some questions, and it will give them a bit of an idea of where maybe, oh, like for example, creativity. Oh, I never thought about that. Oh, fun and adventure is another one. I think as adults, especially, we need to have ways to have fun. But creativity, I feel like, is something that a lot of us have maybe stopped doing along the way. And sometimes it's the smallest thing. We think, oh, I'm going to have to change my whole life. But no, it's more about adding in small things that bring us great joy and tap us back into who we are. So maybe taking a painting class or singing or learning an instrument or something like that, that can make us come alive in ways that we kind of forget how important that is. So figuring out for the client, which areas do they want to grow in? Do they understand how to do that? Would they like to learn how to meditate? I often hear people say, oh no, I can't meditate. I'm horrible. I can't do it. And I always just say, it doesn't have to be 10 minutes or 30 minutes, but can you sit for 1 minute and just in silence? And so it's that process that I love going through with people and figuring out what tools they would like to improve on in their life. And it's not an overnight fix. I really feel like typically I would only work with somebody for 6 months, because it takes time to establish these new habits, and you don't want to do a whole bunch all at once, because otherwise that becomes overwhelming and we typically give up. But really working through it and making them manageable to fit with our life as well. And depending on, how much time we have. I became a 5 a.m.er because that was the only time in my house that was quiet. And I learned to love that. I mean, a lot of times it's 6 a.m. now, but that's fine. But I find that's like sacred time now for me, where it's quiet. I have some time to do some practices that set my day on the right path. But somebody else may be a night owl and they don't want to be doing that in the morning, but they can maybe carve out some time in the evening for themselves. And if they don't even have that, even 5 minutes to be able to give to your own self-care, doing something that really matters to you, I feel like can make a whole lot of difference for people and get them back in touch with their true self.
Yeah.
It's like finding that fire again inside of us.
Yeah,
Especially as
absolutely.
women.
Yes. Because it can.
And using our voice. I think women need to be telling their stories using our voices, but we have been silenced for a long, long time.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable, but it's absolutely necessary.
Yes. I feel like I love everything that you just said. I think that's amazing. And I think it's such a beautiful way to like get in touch with ourselves again, is by going through these different areas of our life that so often we just push aside, forget about, just don't put any energy into, because we're putting energy into caring for others. But there was a point that I was going somewhere with that. See, the memory situation is about the creativity and play one I thought was interesting. This is not where I was going, but it was another thing I wanted to pull out. I mean, creativity is very interesting because, I think a lot of people think I'm just not creative. I'm not a creative person. I don't paint. I don't play an instrument. I don't draw. I don't mold clay. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But creativity really is in all of us. And I think we've been
Mm.
misled to think of creativity as only certain things. And
Yes.
my favorite definition of creativity, and tell me what you think of this, is bringing something into the world that didn't exist before.
Mm.
So that could be a meal, that could be a podcast, that could be
Mm-hmm.
a journal entry, that could be, I mean, it literally could be anything. It's literally
Yeah,
like bringing something forth from inside you that did not exist before.
I love
Um,
that.
and so, yeah, I think it just opens the door for people to tap into their creativity.
Well, and I think what a lot of people think creativity is about an end product. And in the past,
Yes,
a lot of us have been judged on our end product. And
yes,
I
yes.
remember my oldest son was told once, I think he was in about grade 8 art class. He created something, and the art teacher said to him, "Whoa, you're not an artist, stick to sports."
Oh
And
dear.
he literally never created anything ever again because he had the
Oh,
belief that I'm not an artist, I can't create anything. But
oh,
that's not what creativity is about. I feel like
yeah.
creativity is the process of creating and allowing something to come through us. It puts us in a
Hmm.
state of flow at times, and it's the process itself that is
Yes.
healing and inspiring, and it can feel like something is coming through us. um, it's not about the end product or what it
Hmm.
looks like or tastes like, or you know what I mean? But we get stuck
Yes.
in that judgment, afraid of somebody's going to judge what we've done.
Yeah.
And we need to get back into the fun of just creating for the sense of create, or for the fun of creating and
Yeah.
enjoying the process. And you don't even ever have to let anybody see or taste what you've created if that's
Right.
intimidating, but don't lose the power of letting creativity come through us.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And I love that it's, that detaching from outcome, because I also think even in this process of developing self-care or spiritual practices or coming into alignment, like the work that you do, a lot of times we get hung up on the outcome. We want a particular outcome, and then it becomes stressful and overwhelming because we want to get it right, or we just want to achieve whatever,
Yeah,
however
how we see it in our
how we
mind.
see it. Yes, my daughter, she actually was like she draws really beautifully. She's never taken a drawing class in her
Mm.
life. She's just innately in her. But she would stop drawing because she'd have a vision in her mind about how she wanted it to look, and it would not look like that on the paper, even
Mm.
though it was amazing. But to her, it was
Interesting.
not what she had. She could see in her mind an image, and she couldn't replicate that image on the page. And
Wow.
so then it became too frustrating, and she would just stop.
Ah.
And I think we all do that in so
Mm-hmm.
many different ways. We
Yeah.
have an image about what it should look like, feel like, be like, and then we can't make that happen. And so we just throw the baby out with the bathwater, that old
Crumple up
expression.
the, yep,
Yes. Just
absolutely.
like,
Get rid
just
of
it's
it.
all gone. Yeah. Instead of being unattached to outcome and
Mm-hmm.
enjoying the journey. And I actually was talking to my neighbor this week, and I was telling her about, I recently started this podcast, and it's a little bit overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
You
You're
went into
doing great.
entrepreneurship after having many years as a non-entrepreneur, so I'd be curious to hear about your journey there. But it's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn. There is a lot to figure out. It's a lot of trial and error. It can feel very overwhelming,
Yeah.
and I was talking to her about that. And so, she was talking about, she's trying to start a meditation practice and, a breath work practice. And she's feeling overwhelmed by that because you hear so
Mm-hmm.
many different things. You should do this and you should do that,
Yes.
in the wellness space, there's a lot of you shoulds.
Yeah.
And I was saying, it's really funny, like you're saying that. And I have been doing this for like 15 years now, and I never felt overwhelmed by the process. And you know why? Because I had zero expectation. I had
Mm.
zero outcome in mind. I had no goals. I literally was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me try that. And then I would do it and be like, oh, cool. And then or I would try something and be like, oh no,
That's
hard pass.
better.
That is not for me. And I'd move
Yeah.
on and I wouldn't carry it with me. I'd say, like, I tried that. That was not for me. I'm moving on. And then I'd go to the next thing.
You
And I
didn't
was
get
just,
hung up.
No, didn't get hung up, just led by curiosity, led
Oh,
by
that's beautiful.
curiosity and joy, and kept what worked
Hmm.
and discarded what didn't, and had zero judgment about that and zero expectation about outcomes. And and now I look back on all I've learned and how I've grown and, all the everything. And I think, wow, I need to approach every single thing in my life like that.
Yeah,
Right.
I was going to ask if you're that way in your life generally, because that's being led by curiosity is a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. And yes, in many areas of my life, I am like that. This new entrepreneurial journey has definitely, it's been teaching me a lot about myself.
Stretches us, yes.
Yes, it definitely stretches us, but in the best possible way, right? All,
Yeah,
growth is a little bit painful, but it's
yeah.
beautiful on the other side. So I'm really just learning a lot. But to your, clients or just people listening, like entering this stuff without attachment and just being
Hmm.
curious, just taking that next step because you just want to see what happens on the other end.
Well, and that's where that sense of fun and adventure comes in. Like we can take ourselves so seriously and get stuck in perfectionism and think it, like you say, it needs to look a certain way or we need to achieve a certain thing. That's just another way to shut ourselves down, really. But like, let's just play and explore and try things, and you'll get a sense of whether it's right for you or not. And I feel like finding our people is really, really important.
Mhm.
Because otherwise there is a lot of noise in terms of you should be doing this or you should take this program but not that program or this type of meditation but not that. It's like there are no rules. We have
Yeah.
to explore and try things to find what feels good for us and right and true, and
Yes.
it's going to be different for all of us. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's so true. And because some of these things or all of these things, none of them are inherently bad, right? They just might not
Hmm.
be right for one individual
Yes.
and they are right for another individual.
Hmm.
And so I think it helps us to flex that intuition muscle to do it in these
Hmm.
ways, right? So I think of intuition as like a muscle and like a bicep curl. Like the more you do it, like the stronger your intuition starts becoming and the louder
Yes.
it gets and the more you can hear it. So I always encourage people to practice it in small ways because
Mm.
when it's a big thing that you're trying to access your intuition, it feels scarier and heavier and like, oh, if I make the wrong decision, then there's going to be this bad outcome, which I don't really believe in bad outcomes. I think every outcome is what it was supposed to be, but it feels like that in the moment. So
Right.
if we can do it in these little ways where we're like, well, how am I going to be creative? Or, what do I like? What's play mean to me? What does play look like to me?
Mm.
Or
Right.
wherever it is that you can practice following that intuition. And if in the end you're like, well, that really wasn't for me, I thought it was for me, but it wasn't,
Hmm.
there's no downside. There's nothing to
Hmm.
lose.
It's knowledge.
It's
You've
just,
learned
yes,
something. You've clarified something. Yes.
yes, yes,
Which is
yes.
really, it's powerful. I did something called the Clarity Challenge. It was something I learned from Alex Banayan, I think is his name. And it's a 30-day writing practice. I'm big into journaling.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's sort of my creative practice, but it's also so amazing in terms of getting in touch with yourself
Yeah,
and also having things come through you. But
yeah.
for anybody who's looking for clarity in their life, look up the Clarity Challenge. And there's certain questions you ask yourself every single day in terms of looking at the day before, what felt good, what went well, what did not feel good, and you repeat the practice for 30 days in a row, and it reveals patterns to you when you look at the whole 30 days. And you're not allowed to look
Mm,
back on any of your writings until you've completed the whole 30 days. But then
okay.
when you look back, you'll see patterns there, and it helps you kind of tap into that intuition and what's coming out of you each day. So I highly recommend that practice. And it's something I
Okay.
do like every year. You can keep coming back to it because it's illuminating in a way that some of those thoughts are coming to us throughout our day, but we're busy and they get lost. I find a lot of times if I don't had a paper and a pen close by, or I'm typing in notes in my phone, when these little whisperings of intuition and things come to us, you have to capture them.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise, and that's that muscle where once you start capturing them, even if you don't know what it means, write it down.
Yeah.
Something happens once you put it in, like take it out of your thoughts and put it
Head.
either on paper
Yes.
or on a
Hmm.
list or whatever, and you can figure it out later, but at least you've captured it.
Yes. I
And those, I
totally
think
agree.
it's important to pay attention. Yeah.
Yeah, I will. I'll definitely look up that clarity challenge. That's awesome. And I
Yeah.
also really firmly believe in journaling. I feel like there's just some
Mm,
magic that when you put pen to paper, there's something magical that happens there. So yeah, that's a fantastic
yeah.
little tip. I will definitely check that out.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. Yeah, are you 3 hours behind me? It's
So
5:30
right
p.m. where
now,
I am.
that's right. So 3 hours.
Okay. Oh, three
Yeah.
hours. Okay. Any last things you want to leave the audience with? Anything we didn't cover that you want to make sure we talk
I,
about?
I just always want to encourage people in general, but women specifically, the work is worth it. Like it is so worth it. And it always upsets me if I hear somebody that's just giving up and saying, nah, I guess this is just the way my life is, or I guess I'm not meant to do anything bigger. Like, no, no, no. It's always worth it. And just take a small step. It doesn't have to be anything huge, but there's so many resources out there, and we need all of us stepping forward to be our best selves. So
I
that's
really
just
do.
what I would want to leave people with.
Well, that's great. Thank you. I think that's a beautiful message. And the more women who can step into themselves, I think the better this world will become.
I completely agree. Yeah, we
Yeah.
need more women leading and speaking
Yes.
and telling their stories and
Yes.
leading us in a better direction.
Definitely. I think before women were forced into it's the word, like the way things are set up, the way the culture was set up, the way work was set up, we were kind of like forced into that mold, which doesn't really work for women and mothers. And
Hmm.
so we weren't capturing so many women and their beautiful skills and talents. And
Yeah,
the world is really opening up, and ways of working are becoming so much more diverse and so much more adaptable
yeah,
to motherhood.
yes,
And it's just amazing. It's amazing to see. I'm so excited for the future generations of
yeah.
what they can do.
And it
Yeah.
does require us to push back at times and say, no, I'm sorry, you know what? This is not working for me. Here's what will work for me.
Yeah.
Like we're allowed to say that.
Yes. Yes. See, your daughter would say that.
She does. That's what she's teaching me. And even my son, he knows that no is a complete sentence. He does not
Yeah.
need to sugarcoat things. If I ask him something and he just comes back with a no, period. And
Yeah.
that is unheard of for me.
Right.
But I'm learning from him that he doesn't owe me an explanation. The answer is no.
Yeah. Yeah. And more women need to learn that skill for sure,
Yeah.
including myself. I am not excluding
Yeah.
myself in that.
Same.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. I will be putting all your
Thank you.
information in the show notes. So if people want to check you out, work with you, whatever, everything will be there for them to
Amazing.
contact you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Katie. I loved our conversation.
Me too. Thank you, Laura. Have a good day for you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.